Hello there, welcome to lesson number 4 in our series on using FluidDesigner for 3D printing to create ceramic and porcelain objects. Today's lesson we're going to show you how you can use some built-in design tools to create a simple trivet. A trivet is just an object which you can place on a desk, on a table actually, to protect the surface from a hot object that you might place on top of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off FluidDesigner, and we're doing ceramic and porcelain projects here. So if you go to Learning Projects, Ceramic and Porcelain Projects, we're on lesson number 04, so it's 04 and it's the flower shaped trivet. So this is the object that we're actually going to create in today's lesson. So if you go to View and Zoom to Selected, and I'll just move these panels back a little bit. You can see this is the object that we're going to create in today's lesson, and as I said, this you could place this on a table to protect the surface of the table when you place a hot object on the top of it. So what are we going to do? Well, first of all, I'm just manipulating the screen there. First of all, I'm going to switch on the screencast key, so any key presses I make should be displayed in the panel here. And also just to remind you that all the instructions on how to do this are in the help window on the left here. So what do we need to do? We need to add a curve and then curves galore. So if we add curve and curves galore, and this panel here opens up, which is quite important because we're going to change the variables in this panel to create our trivet. But we can't see very much at the moment because we're zoomed out. So if we go to View and Zoom to Selected, you'll see what our shape is at the moment. And as you can see, it's an eye shape. It's not a flower shape like what we're looking for. But that's not a problem. What we need to do is we need to change the type. We change the type from profile, that's the existing one, to a flower shape. And as you can see, that's the one that we're looking for in this particular lesson. Now, as you can see, there are also lots of other shapes that you can choose from: stars, arcs, cogwheels, cycloids, helixes, etc. But we're going to do the flower shape today, so we're going to leave it at that. Now, we need 8 petals. Well, we've actually already got 8 petals if you go around it, but you could change it. You could change it down to 7 or 6. You can change the number of petals to suit your own needs. So that's one of the features that you can do with this particular object. We want to change the petal width. Sorry, we don't want to change the petal width either, because that's also set at 2. But again, you could change it. And as you can see, the width's filling up here. So as we go up from 2 to 2.5, it fills up the gap here. But again, we're going to leave that at 2. We want to change the inner radius to 30. Well, if we click on here and do it, it's going to be really quite slow going up to 30. So an alternative way of doing it is if you hold down the mouse button and drag this, you can dynamically see what's happening as you change it up to 30. Okay, so that's, I'm just going to zoom out now. So I'm scrolling the center mouse button so you can see what's happened to this object. Okay, so I'm just zooming back with the center mouse button, just scrolling it. So we want an inner radius of 30 in this case, so I'm actually going to type it in, 30. We want an outer radius of 50. Well, again, I'm going to drag this. I'm dragging the bar, and as you can see what's happening dynamically. As the number increases, we get to the sort of shape that we want. So I'm just holding down the left mouse button and dragging the mouse to change the profile of this shape. So 50 is what we're looking for. So I'm going to type it in, 50. So clearly typing it's the quick way of doing it, but I'm trying to show you dynamically what's going on. Now this object has got no thickness at the moment. As you can see on the grid there, it's literally just resting on the grid. It's got no thickness. But there's our object now. So these are the values that we want from the help panel, but we need to give this object some depth now. So if we open up the properties window, because this was created from a curve, we went to add curves galore, adding many different types of curves. What we've got in the properties panel is this little icon here, which is to show the curve data information. So if we click on this icon, we'll see at the moment this curve data is a 2D curve. You can have 3D curves as well. And there's no bevel object connected to it at the moment, and there's no depth and no extrude value. Now what we want to do is we want to extrude this object, and extruding it will give it some thickness. So if we click on the end here and click once, that gives us an extrude value of 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, 3, 4, 5 millimeters, and as you can see the object is getting thicker and thicker. Just zoom in there. Now what you've got to realize is that this value 7 millimeters is actually 7 millimeters up from the grid and 7 millimeters down from the grid. This object now has got a total depth of 14 millimeters, not the 7 millimeters shown here. So we're going to change that back a little bit, and we're going to take it down to a thickness of an extrude value, of 2 millimeters, which should give us a thickness of 4 millimeters. So by clicking on the show the main information icon here, I can see the Z dimension. So this is the total thickness is 4 millimeters, and the X and Y give us basically the diameters of this object. So the curve data information allows us to extrude it, and the main information icon allows us to see what the size of this object is. Now once we're happy with the number of petals and the radiuses and also the thickness, what we need to do is to confirm that this is the object that we actually want now. And you do need to make certain that you're happy with this shape before you take the next step, because you won't easily be able to go back. You'll have to start from the beginning again. So once you're happy with the shape, go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. And you'll see the color changes, and this panel now disappears. And also the curve icon up here has also disappeared. So you can't change anything more about this object from those two panels. You can change them here, you can change things here, you can resize it and whatever here, but that's not what we want to do. So there's our object now, there's our flower shaped trivet, and what we need to do now is delete the original object. Okay, so highlight it first of all, and then if you press the X key on the keyboard, that will enable you to delete the original trivet. So there's the one that we've created in today's lesson, and what we need to do is to save it. Now we always recommend in FluidDesigner, don't go to File and Save, always go to Save As. If you go to File and Save, you'll delete the original file on your system. So go to Save As, and if you just click to scroll up the menu system, so instead of saving it in the Learning Projects folder, if you go to My Projects, you can save Lesson 04 Flower Trivet and save it as a Blender file. Now you can't print Blender files, so what you do need to do, and you always need to do this, is you need to export it in a printable file format, and our preference is to go to export it as a wavefront object. So go to File, Export and Wavefront, and we're going to save it to the desktop, and we're going to save it as 04 Flower Trivet object and export that file to the desktop. Okay, now again, we always do recommend that you do the next thing, which is start the application NetFab Basic, which you can download free from the internet. Go to Project and Open, and go to the desktop where you'll find Lesson 04 Flower Trivet, and this is the OBJ, the object file, the printable file. So if you open up that, as you can see, we've got a warning red triangle here, and that's telling us that there is some problem with this object, that it won't in fact print, or probably won't print. In fact, pretty definitely won't print. So there are some issues with this, and this is just how FluidDesigner works, and this is also why you've got to come to NetFab. So what we want to do is, if you go to Extras first of all, what we want to do with NetFab is repair it. So if we click Repair Part, What's NetFab done? Well, one of the things it's done is it's triangulated the faces. It's created triangular faces on the tops and the sides of this trivet. So that's one of the things it's done. You can only print triangles. Now if we just had to move the NetFab across the screen because my video capture panel just won't fit all of NetFab in it. Now what's important are these values over here, and as you can see we've got border edges and it says 96. So if I just click on update, and also now you notice we've got 4 holes in this object. So what NetFab is doing is it's saying that there are some problems around the edges of this object that need sorting out, that need fixing. There are a few holes and there are some border edge problems. Now that's no great shakes. It happens quite often, and all we need to do is to allow NetFab to run it, to repair it. So if we click automatic repair and execute it, you'll see the border edges have disappeared. Now it still says there are some holes, but if we click update, you'll see the holes disappear, and also the number of shells has been reset back to 1. It also tells us how many triangles, so how many triangular faces there are, and how many edges, so that's how many lines around the outside of the object and the outside of the faces. But the important thing in NetFab is to look for zeros over here. So what we can do is we can apply this repair now and remove any old parts, and that's it. Now our warning red triangle has disappeared. This object is now in a printable file format, so we've been able to create this object, not terribly complicated, but a little bit messy to actually create just by drawing lines and joining it all up. Much easier to create using the curves features in FluidDesigner, much quicker. But by using NetFab, we've been able to repair this because we've got no warning red triangle now. So what we need to do is to go to Part and export this part as a wavefront object. And if we export it to the desktop, NetFab Basic will add the little bit of text repaired there. So it's the object file 04 flower trivet repaired, and that is your printable file now. Okay, so that's the end of today's lesson. We've created a simple flower shaped trivet in FluidDesigner, and we've repaired it in NetFab Basic. Thank you.